Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final Q&A of the year here on the Waking from the Meaning Crisis Discord. Here is John. Thank you for being here once again.
It's my pleasure. I love being here.
We love having you. So it's the end of the year, and I thought I'd start off by asking you about your reflections on another unusual year.
Yeah. Wow, that's a hard one. I mean, we sort of came mostly out of COVID, and that's been interesting. Um, a lot happening. I'm getting, I guess personally, or I mean professionally, getting a lot published academically and also non-academically. Knowing that the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis book is going to get published has been very exciting. Um, a lot of stuff has taken off. The Cognitive Science Show doing the series with Greg and with Chris and with Zach and then also doing the series with Zevi and Guy and experimenting with the with the format dialogically and doing it multi-channel. Um, all of this has been very exciting. I have a sense, and I was talking to both Pauls, Paul Vanderklay and Paul Antleiter, and the sense of something's happening right now. It feels like things are heating up in an important way in this corner of the internet, as Civello puts it. Um, I feel that too. I feel the conversations, Paul Vanderklay and both Pauls, in fact, reinforce that the conversations seem to be moving to a new level um, uh, qualitatively, and I agree with that. So I feel that year started in a very strange situation with the fatigue from COVID. Now it feels to me, both professionally and I guess I don't know what to call it, interpersonally on this part of the this corner of the internet, things are ending very strongly for me. I have a lot of concerns. Um, I think the meta crisis is ramping up. I think the mental health tsunami that was predicted for the effects of COVID is now starting to see that unfold in increasing ferocity. Um, yeah, I'm, and I don't mean this is an observation as not a criticism. I'm very concerned about how rapidly things seem to be getting very bad in the United States in a lot of ways. And so that, of course, will have a tremendous effect on Canada and on the world at large. So there's a lot that's happening. That's also great cause for concern. Um, it's like the Chinese proverb curse. I feel that right now is a very, very interesting time, both simultaneously. Opportunity and threat are very apparent, and I am excited by how much these communities and these communities of communities are growing. I was just also today talking with Rafe Kelly and how his community is growing and how it's intersecting with other communities. Um, so, um, yeah, I feel like the world is getting significantly more challenging in an accelerating fashion, but also that the people that are trying to steal the culture, if you'll allow me my slogan, are also getting increasingly um, responsive and sophisticated in in how they're dealing with it. I mean, it looks like they're rising to the challenge. I still don't have any clear sense of how things are going to go, but um, right now I'm still encouraged, I guess.
So we have our work cut out for us.
Very much so, and increasingly so. I think, given the recent Supreme Court decision, and I'm not weighing in on that debate, but the fact that California is now going to try and pass a bill trying to skirt around the Second Amendment, we're seeing something very analogous to what was happening right before the first Civil War, which was individual states were claiming their ability to ignore the Constitution. And I can't see that ending well. I can't see that ending other than in increasing discord and acrimony and violence. So I hope I'm wrong about that, but there's a lot that yeah, there's the challenges are increasing at an increasing rate.
All right, well, let's see what we can do to help out. All right, our first question tonight is from Capello. In your most recent dialogos with Jordan Hall, you touch on the role of beauty in connecting to reality as it shines through appearance, but also as it withdraws from appearance in a wholeness which resists being fully grasped. Earlier in the discussion, you both also referenced music and vibes as non propositional examples of attunement to that underlying sense of aesthetic reality. Would you
Mm-hmm.
include chi, I think I think chi, in the
Yep.
same
Yep.
in the same suite of perceptual capacities? And if so, how do embodiment practices which involve it expand our sensitivity to this gestalt alignment with the beauty of being? Do some methods of cultivating the sense work better than others, and if so, why?
Wow. So first of all, I think the I just want to compliment that question. It's amazing. Secondly, it's so I don't know, fortuitous. Yeah, I think that discussion of being able to vibe with beauty that Jordan and I were working out is when you, as long as you take the vibing both internally, psychosomatically, and externally, inactively, yeah, I think that's what chi is. And that's why the metaphors in Chinese are usually musical metaphors rather than energy metaphors, which I think are terribly, terribly misleading for a lot of people. Yeah, so yeah, it's very much that. I mean, as long as you know, as long as when you hear vibing, you also the term vibing, you're also hearing, flow, and you're hearing, you know, synesthetic integration of different sense modalities. Um, yeah, but the short answer to that very profound question, the first part of the question is yes. Um, do I think there are some embodied practices that are better at it than others? Um, yeah. Typically, the ones that have lasted the longest and have found a reliable way to integrate imaginal aspects with sensory motor aspects, which comes out in things like Tai Chi Chuan and other Chi cultivation practices. But of course, music, the ability to dance well to music can also bring that out, jazz especially. Um, I mean, since we're still working out the science of this, there, you, I hesitate to make any definitive predictions or pronouncements, but I do think generally those sets of practices uh, that have the most sustained history, and secondly, seem to be tapping into as many dimensions of cognition and meaning making as possible. Like I said, combine those that really seem to integrate the way words and music go together in sound, the way they integrate the imaginal and the sensory motor and the breathing and the attentional, especially mindfulness aspects. I think those have the greatest chance of bringing people into the experience of ki or chi. Um, I think there are other practices that help to build that out. I mean, a large part of the discussion I had was with Rafe was going over trying to get clearer about what is it in a practice that predicts that it will generalize and transfer, permeate through people's lives and percolate through layers of the psyche. And we were talking a lot about uh, the current idea about the evolution of evolvability, comparing like cats and dogs along those lines. Dogs demonstrate a greater capacity to evolve, um, so they have more evolvability, and that seems to be one of their distinct traits. Is why they're so successful in so many environments. It's even why they were able to pair up with us in a way that seems to be um, more dependent on their ability to adapt than cats. Cats are basically paired up with us because we sort of indulge them in interesting ways. Um, so there's something analogous to that in cognition, which and Rafe was talking to somebody in who's at sort of the cutting edge of the neuroscientific study of sensory motor abilities, and this idea, very analogous to biology, of trying to get not just the evolution of particular skills, but a higher order ability to evolve capacity to evolve new skills and what that looks like. I won't go into it in detail. The video will be available. It's a long video, and there's a lot of other discussion in there. Um, and so, again, this is all preliminary, but trying to see if a lot of this cutting edge work in biology and in sensory motor behavior and the neuroscience of it, if it's converging with an explanation of why some things transfer so well, uh, like Tai Chi Chuan, and others don't transfer as well. Um, and so I think I hesitate to make a promise, but it seems plausible to me that we're going to get better at making these kinds of recommendations in the next 10 years or so. We're going to be able to say which practices, in a more objective and reflective manner, which practices are much more likely to be successful at bringing about vibing or uh, the chi experience or resonant at one mint, etc. So this is a very, very exciting area right now, um, and there's just so much happening so fast that when it finally reverberates back into the general culture, I think it's going to have a very significant impact. We're going to start being able to explain why this practice seems to be more generalizable, both intrapsychically and in the world, than that practice, and that will form hopefully one basis, not the only basis. There's also ethical reasons, and there's social integration reasons, but that would be one significant dimension by which we could more adroitly recommend some practices over the others.
Anya asks, I'm interested in John's take on reconciling his four P's with McGilchrist's four kinds of knowing: scientific, rational, imaginative, and intuitive. It seems like a
Mm-hmm.
case could be made for rational equals propositional, scientific equals procedural, I don't know if equals, but or aligns with, participatory equals imaginative, and perspectival equals intuitive.
I don't know. I'd like to talk to Ian again about that proposal. I mean, prima facie, that seems like a good pairing. I need to know more what Ian means by those. I do think that there's going to be more and more convergence on something like the four Ps because they do ground out in different kinds of memory, and different kinds of normative phenomenology. Your sense of what makes it right or wrong, etc. And the fact that Ian and I converged a lot around insight in our previous discussion, um, I don't have enough to say a lot of confidence. I haven't read his most recent book because it's enormous, um, and so I just can't put the time aside to do it. Um, so I hesitate to agree with the proposal. It seems reasonable. Like I said, I think we're going to find more and more uh, people zeroing in on these. Dan and I got 3 papers published, Dan Chiappia and I, basically highlighting, the role of the perspectival and the participatory in affording the skill development and the theory generation about the Mars rovers, and in high impact journals. So that says something too. Um, I think, yeah, which I mean, of course, egotistically, I'm pleased with it, but also in a little less egocentric fashion. Um, I think that speaks that other people are converging on opening up these kinds of ideas about different ways in which we um, comport ourselves with realness. And it wouldn't surprise me if Ian came to something very similar. Like I said, we found a terrific number of convergences between our work when we last talked, and I think it's plausible that that kind of mapping would work out. I just can't say yes to it right now because I'm ignorant about what McGilchrist means in depth about those. Because I said, I haven't uh, I haven't really mapped out some of his more recent work as carefully as I would need to in order to answer that question well.
All right, Struan, I have a question for John.
Hi, John.
Hey, Struan, you were mentioned frequently today in the discussion I had with the 2 Pauls. So, and they're always,
Ooh.
always well, by the way, always well.
Yeah, I've talked to Paul, Paul Van der Klee quite a lot. So, but I'm pleased that yeah, the conversation's progressing. And well, this is a kind of a facetious question. Um, can I get credit on a research paper? And then, well, more seriously, I would like to propose or suggest that some research be done because if I understand it correctly, your research on meaning in life in connection with mystical experiences is related also to the mystical experiences that people have under psilocybin, for example. And the
Yeah.
so from what I understand from the psilocybin example is it's not just the drugs that you take, it's when you have the mystical experience specifically that the trait openness increases by 1 standard deviation.
Yeah, that's right.
Now,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that
yeah,
depends on a lot more than just a drug in order for that to occur. That's right.
exactly. And so your work, you are theorizing that it's not actually the specific insight; it's the insight machinery that that gets triggered that actually gives the meaning in life boost. The prediction that
Yeah,
I'd like to make is
yeah,
that
which is
the higher that somebody's trait openness is before the increase will be predictive of exactly how much of an increase in meaning in life they experience. In other words, if somebody is very low in openness to experience, but they have the mystical experience, it's not going to have such an enormous impact as somebody who's, let's say, very high in openness to experience. And that's specifically what I would like to test for. And the reason that I'd make this prediction is because I think actually that the connection to trait openness isn't just incidental. There's on the Wikipedia description of openness to experience, there was this one line that really caught my attention. It said, a study comparing the temperament and character inventory with a 5-factor model found that openness to experience had a substantial positive correlation with self-transcendence. And then it describes that in
yeah,
brackets as a spiritual
yeah,
trait. And if
yeah.
there's one person in this world that actually fits that bill, it's basically you. I can't think of anybody else who is more focused on self-transcendence. And you also, at least to me, I mean, I'm also high in trait openness, but you strike me as somebody who's also very, very high in trait openness. And so I think that,
Yeah.
like for example, the experience that you were having that you related to Rick Rapetti about
Yep.
the Platonic forms and everything, I think not necessarily using Plato's metaphysics, but connecting the experience phenomenologically to trait openness is going to be very fruitful. And yeah, so that's just basically I'd like to see research done to confirm or deny that.
I think that's right. I mean, I mean, the Consciousness and Wisdom Studies Lab is not really running anymore right now. COVID sort of uh, like sort of knocked the legs up from underneath it. I don't know when it'll start back up again. Um, Gary Venetian and we recently just published a paper on relevance realization and personality theory. making use of the work with Colin DeYoung. And the three of us are actually trying to work out some ways of testing some of that, some specific predictions that come from that theoretical integration. One of the things we could do is exactly try to see something like that. I think you're right. It's the idea that openness also predisposes you to these experiences. So there's a way in which openness may perhaps bootstrap itself, is what I hear you suggesting. There seems to be a weird, um, uh, but it doesn't seem to be a straight linear process run because it's because Gallagher did some experimental work with mixed reality, I should be VR and real reality, with the overview effect, and got the paradoxical results that people that were sort of very religious and spiritual, and there's some confounding there. I'll admit that, but they were actually less affected by the overview effect, um, and they postulated that people who are experiencing awe more frequently um, are I don't know what to say.
Used to it?
They're more used to it, and what I'm trying to make the case that awe seems to be a comparative thing rather than just a straight absolute function. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Well, what I was thinking was
go
that
ahead.
with the like trait openness as a personality trait, right? Your brain can't
Yeah,
know what constitutes an insight or what doesn't in terms of how good the insight is. The only thing that it can really detect is whether an insight has occurred, and then the feel good juices in your brain or whatever would then decide to reward that. And I would think that the higher
yeah,
your trait openness is, the more of those juices you're actually going to experience during the event.
yeah. I mean, I think that's right. Um, like I said, uh, but I'm just wondering also the degree to which uh, there might be a habituation constraint in there. Like I said, that people who are high in trait openness might also be getting so many of these experiences um, that they might not show up as readily within the lab. Um, I happen to
Yeah,
think you're
I
right.
mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I suppose I could also be, it could be anti-correlated, but I just, well, then let me weaken my prediction. It's going to be that connection is going to be significant in one direction or the other, either bigger or
Well,
smaller.
I think you're right that it's ultimately going to be a correlate. I just think it's going to be dynamic rather than linear, right? I think it's going to be
Yeah,
nonlinear in some fashion. Um, just got
yeah.
some
Well, I
work.
mean,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, okay. So that's fair enough. I mean, it's just to me, it's interesting, but then also, like the underlying motivation is to get the trait openness personality machinery, which is it's not culturally instantiated, connected to, for example, the language of Plato's forms, in
Yeah,
a phenomenological sense, so that you can, so you can make the bridge between the biology and the first
I
person
like that. I
experience,
think
let's
that's
say.
great. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've just been on a publication with Brian Ostaphan that um, the way awe seems to have an impact seems to be with the via it's mediated by the ability to process uncertainty, um, which would correlate typically with openness because openness tends to view novelty as opportunity, whereas some of the other, like neuroticism, tends to view novelty as threat. And so that also lines up with your
Right.
prediction. So there's a lot going on about this right now, and myself and my RA and one of my RAs and Jennifer Steller and others, Michelle Ferrari, we're trying to get another experiment on awe and cognitive flexibility. Um, yeah, I think that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I can promise to get such a study undertaken anytime soon, but I do think that there's a lot of things converging on what you're saying, and I more and more want to understand this better. Gary and I are working on a paper where we're trying to integrate relevance realization theory with attachment theory and thereby link attachment theory to personality theory, which might go even further towards what you're suggesting. I'm sorry, there's just so much. Like I was saying at the very beginning, there's just so much happening right now, and it's like so many things are drawing together so powerfully. It's uh,
Kind of
yeah,
cool.
I think it's great. I think it's great. I mean, I think it's good what you're proposing. Like I said, I can't make any promises about undertaking a study right now.
Yeah,
But
that's fine. I'll just I'll keep an ear out, and if I hear anything, then I'll know that I did something worthwhile. um, well, if I can just add as
Well,
a final
actually,
thought.
Strawn, I think maybe if you could
Okay,
come, we have time to come back at the end. There's still a bunch of people who want to ask, but uh,
fair enough.
you can get a
Yeah.
minute. Thanks so much, Strawn. Sherry asks, I really enjoyed your latest discussion with Jordan Hall. I've been thinking about what it means to be in the world and not of it. And I have seen you
yeah.
getting closer to the significant importance of understanding this concept. I must admit, I'm still groping in the dark, but I'm very curious about your thoughts on it. If you could briefly summarize what you think this is pointing to, I would be ever so grateful. And if you've had further thoughts since your conversation, I would be interested in hearing them.
Um, I had further thoughts about that. I mean, yeah, the in the world but not of the world conversation was really um, at the very edge of my thinking for me. Um, I mean, Jordan often does that to me, and I mean that with affection. I don't mean it sound like I'm a victim or anything like that. And I hope he feels that that's reciprocated. Um, I don't know if I have anything to add right now, um, other than a promise that I want to talk more to Jordan about this idea about being in the world but not of the world, and what that means uh, for sort of the intersection of the ontological, the ethical, and the aesthetic. Um, I'm sorry. Normally, I try to be as free flowing with all of you as I can, but I'm a little bit hesitant or reticent to say anything right now. One of the things I would like to do, I would like somebody to ask me this question again, because I want to go back and re-listen to that. I very rarely do that. Re-listen to that discussion and also talk with Jordan again about pursuing it. Um, I share with you the idea that I think we're getting closer to something, um, but and that's something that's really important right now. Um, but I guess I'm going to ask for I'm going to request patience. I want to go back over that. Um, I haven't had a chance to do that, and I want to because I've just been recording a whole bunch of conversations, all again converging in ways I don't yet clearly see. And I don't mean to build a mystique around me. I'm just saying how things are for me right now. But I want to go back and look over that video again, and want to pick up. And Jordan and I are going to pick up on it again, and I want to try and do what I've done before. I want to take that notion and pursue it with Jordan for a bit, and then pursue it with Guy, and maybe with Chris, a bunch of people. Chris and I are going to be doing a series together on Kierkegaard and Socrates, and that obviously will touch on this tremendously. Um, so I'm not being coy, but precisely because I think this question is really at the edge, at the horizon of my intelligibility, um, and because I feel with you that it's really important. um, I want to come back to this question. I'm asking, in fact, I'm going to request from Brett that this question get re-asked at the next Discord server because I want to reflect on it a little bit more. Um, it's really important to me, and I'm glad and encouraged by the fact that you're finding it central and important. Um, in the two conversations I had today with the two Pauls uh, and the one with Rafe, we're also circling around this, um, and what this means and how this translates back into our. I mean, the book I'm reading with Dan Chiappi on Merleau-Ponty and the body. um, how this translates back into the core of our embodiment is also something that I am feeling my way towards with other people. Um, yeah, this is. I don't know. It's a topic that for me cuts across the theoretical, the philosophical, and the personal in a powerful way. So I'm going to make that request of you, Brett. I would like I said, I want to do this a little bit more, but I want to answer this question. I want a little bit more time to explicate and articulate what's unfolding in my thinking and in my dialogue with others before I answer it.
Sure, I will diarize it to ask you again next time. And Sherry adds, the super sensible is crashing in. No worries. Look forward to hearing more. Oh, I love how you are connecting it to embodiment too. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Um, good. Thank you.
Alexandra, you have a question for John.
Hello, John. It's lovely to meet you. I just want to express great gratitude for everything that you're doing. It's keeping me sane here in Australia. Um, I really, really am so thankful that you pointed me to Nishitani because it's just totally blowing my mind and I'm loving every word. I'm going through it very slowly and chewing it thoroughly. But I remember you commented on or replied to a comment I made on a video at some point saying that you felt that Buddhism didn't really satisfy you intellectually. And I'm just asking if you could elaborate a little bit on that idea.
I mean, and I know you know that I mean that with a tremendous amount of love and respect for Buddhism. I
Yeah,
feel it's
absolutely.
yeah, so good. And the Kyoto see the Kyoto school is especially important to me because the Kyoto school reflects exactly that position. So like let's take something we have in common right now, Nishitani. So Nishitani clearly is deeply influenced by Buddhism, but the religion and nothingness and the Kyoto school point to the fact that Buddhism needs, um, if it's going to respond to the problem of nihilism, which is, of course, I think central to the meaning crisis, that Buddhism needs to enter into serious um, dialogos, deep, mutually transformative discussion um, with the Western philosophical tradition, James, Heidegger, in particular, also important aspects of the Neoplatonic tradition. Eckhart was Meister Eckhart was clearly deeply influential, but other aspects of it. Um, I just got a book today. Just hang on one sec. I want to read you the title. I haven't started reading it yet.
Oh my God, I need a money tree to buy all the books that you keep recommending. And
Yeah,
another 3 lifetimes to read them all.
yeah. I wish I had Doctor Who's TARDIS. This
Yeah.
is by Thomas Plant. It's called The Lost Way to the Good. Dionysian Platonism, Shin Buddhism, and the shared quest to reconnect a divided world. This is me trying to point out the Lost Way to the Good by Thomas Plant. The deep discussion that's opening up between Neoplatonism and Shin Buddhism and other aspects of Buddhism, and of course also with Zen Buddhism. Um, so I take it that the Kyoto school. Well, how can I put this? I feel that I'm in company with the Kyoto school in thinking that addressing the problem of nihilism needs Buddhism needs to enter into a deep discussion with the wisdom traditions other than itself. Now, I also agree with Nishitani that Buddhism can serve as a basis for criticizing um, Western philosophy, like his critique of Nietzsche as not being able to follow nihilism to its depths. I think is one of the
Yeah, yeah.
best.
This critique of
Yeah,
Descartes, I loved.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I also think that not only is there a responsibility of Buddhism to respond to and to listen to the great wisdom traditions, especially the Neoplatonic wisdom tradition of the West, but there's also an opportunity for Buddhism to help that tradition to some degree recover itself. That's definitely what's happened for me and other people by its ability to criticize um, biases that are deeply embedded at the level of presupposition within Western philosophy. So for me, I think there's a strong case to be made for the need for a deep dialogos between Buddhism and Neoplatonism, for example, which is why I got the plant book. The plant book, to my mind, is a good follow-up to Religion and Nothingness.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. There's another one on the list. And yeah, have a really beautiful, restful holiday season. And again, so much gratitude.
Well, thank you very much, Alexandra. I don't know. I think it'll be beautiful. I'm not so sure it's going to be very restful. Um, there's a lot of stuff happening. I hope I can get to take a week off. But I'm finding this sort of mounting kairos very energizing to me right now, and so we'll see. But I also extend to you, uh, the best wishes for your holiday season.
Thank you. I feel the same way though. Bye.
Bye.
LLK has a question. What do you think of the sharp divides? What do you think of sharp divides between the feminine and the masculine? For example, Jordan B. Peterson's Chaos and Order, or the Taoist Stillness and Activity. How would you map the masculine feminine in an opponent processing model? And what has gone wrong with this in the meaning crisis? Have they been suppressed, or is there an imbalance? This is not something I've heard you mention, mainly maybe because it's too inflammatory, but psychoanalytically and evolutionary, shouldn't sex be at the heart of the meaning crisis?
Uh, yeah. So I think sexuality and spirituality are deeply interwoven in our embodiment. Um, and part of what you said is exactly right. There's caution on my part because I tend to avoid conversations that are impossible because of the way they have been politicized. But let me try and back that up with a more substantial argument, which is analogous to my general argument for being metapolitical. Um, I think the issue we're wrestling with, and this will be controversial, but I think at least hopefully in an insightful and thought-provoking way, I think the issue we're trying to wrestle with masculinity and femininity is actually embodiment and the relationship between identity and embodiment, um, and that because we are this is still very nascent for us, understanding the deep interpenetration of the meaning making that we find at the height of our spirituality and the sexuality that we find in the depths of our embodiment. Understanding, in cognitive scientific terms, I would argue, the deep interpenetration of this. I think that these divisions we're making between masculine and feminine are often not helping to get at this deeper problem, which is the problem of our embodiment. Um, and notice that how that's bound up with the Christian idea of incarnation, since it's the Christmas season, and what does that mean, and how do we get clear on all of that? I hesitate to move into this domain. I mean, the very ideas of activity and passivity and uh, going out into the world or staying in the home, and how whether or not these map on to masculinity and femininity, and whether those map on particular kinds of behaviors within our sexuality. Um, I often find these proposals are either true because they're vague or false because they're too simplistic. Um, and so I think I understand, I hope I understand the import of the question, which is a lot of people are wrestling with these questions right now, um, and they're wrestling with, like, for example, if one identifies as male, for example, um, what does it mean to be a man, and what does that mean? Does it mean I'm masculine? Does it mean a certain balance between masculinity and femininity? Um, but I understand the import of the question. I just worry, for the reasons I've tried to articulate, whether or not this is the right vocabulary to try and pose these questions. I do think that there are more fundamental features of the phenomenology of our embodiment that we need to get a very good understanding of before we can answer these or approach these questions well. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing the deep dive with Dan Chiappi into, going back to Merleau-Ponty and going back to um, uh, the connections between phenomenology and the Neoplatonic tradition, to try, because this is one of the things, you all hear me praise the Neoplatonic tradition and even identify in some ways as a Neoplatonist. But one of my deep criticisms of the Platonic tradition is it got very messed up about the body. Porphyry begins his biography of Plotinus as saying Plotinus always behaved as someone who is ashamed of having a body. I don't want to be that kind of person. I think that's a profound mistake. And I think the Neoplatonic tradition got messed up about the body versus the having mode, and there's conflation, and then there's confusion, and then there's confusion of actuality with the mind and passivity with the body, and then that maps onto the masculine mind and the feminine body. And I think that's just such a misreading of how we're understanding embodiment. That's for me a strong criticism of the Platonic tradition, and I also am very critical of the Allied conception of perfection as a kind of completeness or rest. Um, so, yeah, I don't want to. I want to just dodge this question, but like I said, I don't know about how. I don't feel this question is so fraught that one should have very good confidence because of the depths of one's knowledge, not because of the fierceness of one's convictions, but because of the depths of one's knowledge and understanding before one should enter into it. Um, like I said, this is something I would be happy to talk to at length with Jordan Peterson about, because I think we could have a respectful dialogue about it. But I would like to do it in private, I suppose, because the chances of it being misread, I think, would be very significant.
But of course, we'd all like to hear it.
Yeah. So yeah. Uh, I guess I'm just gonna. I keep coming back to this. And this is advice I'm following myself. I suggest we put a pause on this question, this way of trying to frame. We put a pause on believing that we have framed this question appropriately, that we're touching on the issue we want to touch on, and do a much deeper dive into the understanding of embodiment that's emerging within 4E Cog Sci and some very cutting edge phenomenology. Um, and then again, that's goes towards, like I said, you might not realize it, but the three papers that Dan and I published on the NASA scientists moving the rovers around on Mars goes to the core of this in a deep way. Um, so I know that's not the answer, the type of answer you were looking for. You were probably wanting, you know, a definitive statement about it rather than all this caution. Um, but I did want to indicate to you clearly that my caution is not just the practical caution of this gets drawn into uh, political debate, which I think, as I've argued elsewhere, misleads us away from what we need to address the meaning crisis. I think also specifically here, um, I just I think we need to understand some. We need a lot. We need to understand embodiment a lot more profoundly. Um, it's even wrong to say you have a body. and that comes so easily to our lips. In a very profound way, you are your body. And the fact that your body is something that it simultaneously touches and is touched, is in contact with the world, but also is uh, drawn onto itself. These are the dichotomies, but also the connections that I think have to be understood more profoundly right now.
All right. J.S. Alves writes, I apologize for my ignorance on the field of human science, but I am fascinated about the subject of logos, and I can feel it as a unique force, or whatever it is, when John speaks. For some reason, it seems like the words are alive, and they carry a meaning that goes beyond what words can express. In this matter, would it be preposterous to say that logos can be the meaning of things and transcend time and space? It totally makes sense to me that the meaning crisis is also due to the disconnection of our being from the source of logos, thus causing a lack of meaning in our lives, individually and collectively.
I don't think there's anything preposterous about that at all. I think that's very much um, that's very much what I'm talking about, and very much what I'm trying to learn about and exemplify and explore with the whole dialectic into dialogos project. Um, there's something about the logos of ontos, the logos of being, and that's where we get ontology from, that we've lost. I think there's enough agreement among the prophets of the meaning crisis that that's the case, um, and that trying to recover it, and not just conceptually, but the way you're recovering it, phenomenologically, functionally, and conceptually in an integrated fashion. I think that's very much what needs to happen in order to address the meaning crisis. Um, and when those dimensions are coming apart, um, like they are in many of our discussions, um, that's why I hesitate to sort of wade in and take a position, precisely because the way these things are being disconnected from each other in the framing of the arena is the very thing I want to challenge. So I don't think what you said was preposterous at all. I think it was bang on.
Rob G asks, can myth and narrative home people today in a way it did 1,000 or 5,000 years ago? Nishitani, in Religion and Nothingness, says that Buddhism tends to demythologize cultures it interacts with. Do you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
any of this?
Yeah, I mean, depends what I mean, and Nishitani is a profound thinker. I mean, it does and it doesn't. I mean, like when Buddhism goes into Tibet, it doesn't demythologize. It interacts with the shamanic religion there, and it generates a powerful mythology. But the point is also well taken. It also undermines understanding that mythology in a naive, realistic sort of way. Tibetan Buddhism is this is not a criticism. This is just I find it personally very very challenging to grok. So I guess I mean again I'm in discussion, um, um, not in debate, but there's disagreement in the discussion around this question with many people about narrative. I'll say again, because people keep attributing something to me that I'm not saying. So I'm going to try again. I think narrative is indispensable. You're not going to become a temporally extended moral agent without narrative. I think narrative is indispensable in teaching us how to realize non-logical entity, and share it. I think this is very, very important. Um, Sets of skills and virtues that are needed for responding to the meaning crisis. However, um, narrative, and you can see this in great novels. Albert Camus' The Plague is probably one of the greatest versions. It's funny because you say, well, that's a novel, it's a narrative. Well, read the book. Um, and I, um, I take one of my slogans. I want to learn how to be a saint without God, from one of the characters of that book, Teru. But one of the deep points of the plague is how much how impotent the narratives are in the face of the plague, and how people suffer and magnify their suffering because of the narratives, and an ability to drop out of narrative and in a very stoic like fashion. That's what one of the main characters clearly does. Is the only response to something like the plague that preserves one's humanity. I think this is a great work of literature, and it's not the only one. I'm just using this as an example, but it's an exemplary one of the fact that we need to pay attention to the fact that narrative can make things much worse. And I don't mean a particular narrative, because we like to say, well, that's, it's that narrative that makes things worse. But no, the point of the book is that all the narratives, because there is no narrative for the plague. And you all know why I'm choosing the plague as the book right now, because of COVID, of course. There is no narrative, and the desperation, silly, fucked up desperation that people on all sides are trying to create a narrative for this is just causing extra death and extra suffering all around, both sides, all sides, etc. And we're not paying attention to that fact. And I think that's what Camus was trying to get us to see with the plague. And so while I hold narrative, and I do for the reasons I've given, in very high esteem, I think, and this is one of the problems, and Stoicism wrestled with this, which is why I think Camus turns to Stoicism with the main character. The fact that our narrative isn't capable of dealing with things like the plague. And it spins crazy, because you can be in the very best narrative of the world. I just saw this on a TV show, and it was like, when my partner and I were watching it, we're just shocked when it happened. This person's in love and found the love of a life. He steps into the traffic and a car hits him and he dies. Stupidly. No great, nothing, to no purpose, to no moral education, to no completion of the narrative, to no satisfaction of any of this. This is of course, one of the big claims of Buddhism, that you have to break people out of the narrative with the koan. And I would say it's also part of Jesus of Nazareth's use of the parable, breaking people out of the narrative. Because for all of its great benefits, the narrative also can be one of the greatest of the idols. And so I worry, like I said, and you could hear, I'm sorry, the anger in my voice around COVID about this. I worry that we're heading into kinds of meta crises in which we grab for basically the Paleolithic, upper Paleolithic transition, the Paleolithic psychotechnology of narrative, and I think we should, I don't want to pronounce, so I'll caution. I think we need to seriously consider the possibility that it will make things worse. It will make things worse. So opening people up to the trans narrative, I think it is very important right now. I think what we need to do is to remind people that they need a place from which, and they do it without realizing it, a place from which they generate narratives, and a place from which they compare and evaluate narratives. It is not self a narrative. That's one of the places. And I just talked to him today, and again, we expressed our deep respect and affection for each other. But this is one of the places where I disagree with Paul. Just like I think that which binds all of the aspects together in the multi-aspectual moreness of a thing is not yet another aspect. I think that which generates all narratives and allows us to move from one narrative to the other or compare narratives is not itself another narrative. We're just getting into an infinite regress. And so I think we need to move into that place from which we make those judgments and from which we generate narratives in order to ask the question that has been asked by Robert, which is, are we really sure that the narrative, our narrative capacity is what we should be relying on to try and grok what's happening right now? Um, I don't deny that if people are going to do it, but I think the question is a profound question, and it needs to be answered with true responsibility, because the question is questioning whether or not we should rely or suppose, maybe that's a better way of putting it, suppose that our narrative capacities are equal to the task we are facing. Um, yeah, one of the things, like I said, that has sort of added fuel to my fire is precisely uh, the narrative frenzy around COVID. Again, not one side or the other, all sides, and how you can make a good case again on both sides that this has just caused extra suffering and extra death. And so I think the question needs to be heard very deeply. I know a lot of people in this community, people that I respect here, disagree with me, but I think maybe pause the disagreement long enough to hear the depth from which the question was being asked. Because I think the very possibility of the question being asked seriously needs to be recognized. So that's what I'll say about that.
Not my account asks, can you tell us more about the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis book?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess this will have to be my last question, because we're approaching the hour mark. Um, yeah. So Madeline, Ramian and I have worked on it together. She's been a terrific co-author. Um, so because some of the obviously a lot of the text, a lot of the language has to be changed because I'm talking first person and gesturing and stuff, and so translating that into something like text. We tried to keep it as close to the transcripts as we can, but getting it into something you can read in a book without having me there gesturing and using intonation and talking, of course, required skill. And Madeline did a lot of great work for that. Um, and there's lots of extra figures. Um, all the references are in, citations are in, all the books that can you the list of books that's all there. I guess most importantly, and this is already circulating, but confidential in a confidential manner. What a lot of people are giving a lot of positive feedback for the book version is, um, well, there's a 40-page glossary of all of the important terms. To use Paul's phrase, of all the fancy Vervaeke words. There's a 40-page glossary. It's linked. It's interlinked. It's linked with the specific passages, like the specific episodes or chapters where it was introduced. Um, and there's a lot of different add-ons that the publisher is suggesting that I think are going to be fantastic. I think the book will also allow people to pace the presentation of the presentation of the material. Um, just the book. We really haven't matched the technology of the book, the way you can move around and go from this page to that. There's a lot of advantages to it. Um, if everything goes according to intended plan, the book should come out. So this is the first. The book. The series is broken up into two books. The first book covers the first 25 episodes. The second book, the second. And the first book should be out probably sometime next year, before this same time next year, I would predict. Probably even earlier than that. I don't know what else to say about it, but I can, in all good conscience, recommend that even people who've watched the series a couple of times that they should get the book. I think it will definitely afford a deeper understanding and a deeper response to the core arguments. So that's the most I can say right now.
Well, we all look forward to that. So, John, I'd like to thank you once again for another great Q&A, and I'd like to wish you happy holidays and a great new year. And to all of our listeners in here now and all the members of the forum, just thank you so much for being here as we approach the end of the year. I'm so thankful for all of you here, and I look forward to another great year next year. So thank you so much, and happy holidays to all.
Happy holidays to everybody, and thank you so much. And I want to encourage the vitality of this community. Keep going, keep doing everything you're doing, and I'm very hopeful that when we are talking again a year from now, there will have been continuation of the impressive growth, both qualitatively and quantitatively, I see here in this community. So thank you very much, and I encourage you all and wish you all the happiest of holidays. Take good care, everyone.
Thanks so much.